All right, let's just dive right in. Have you ever caught yourself wondering why human behavior so often, and I mean completely, contradicts the promises people make to us? You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like that coworker who swears they're going to help you out, but then, poof, they totally vanish the second the deadline hits. Their words say one thing, but their actions, they tell a completely different story. Well, today we are unpacking a really fascinating, highly pragmatic source that tackles this exact frustrating reality. It really sets up the need for a radically different perspective on our social dynamics, questioning the very foundation of how we interact with each other.
Welcome to this explainer. What we're looking at today is an impartial breakdown of what the source material calls a dangerous mindset. Now, just to be clear, it's not dangerous in a violent or malicious way. It's dangerous to manipulators. It's deeply rooted in Machiavellian principles, and the source claims that if you adopt 7 specific mental shifts, you can become virtually immune to being controlled or lied to. It's basically a lens on reality that strips away all our usual comforts and polite fictions to show you how the world actually works.
To unpack all of this, we've organized the source's 7 shifts into a clean, 4-part playbook for this explainer. First, decoding human behavior. Second, the illusion of fairness. Third, trust and vulnerability. And finally, playing the game.
So let's get into Section 1, Decoding Human Behavior. The source argues pretty emphatically here that we have to completely rethink how we assess the intentions of the people around us. And that brings us to the very first major mental shift, which highlights a really stark contrast. The naive view assumes that words equal truth, right? We want to believe what people tell us. But the dangerous mindset recognizes that words are often just a cheap performance. They're used to manage your perception of them, to look good, or honestly, just to get out of trouble. True understanding, the source asserts, only comes from watching consistent patterns of behavior. You literally have to stop listening to the promises and start paying close attention to what people actually do.
Which brings us right to the second shift, self-interest. Now, the source doesn't view humans as inherently evil, which is an important distinction. Instead, it views us as predictably driven by survival. At the absolute core of every single decision is this hidden calculation. What's in this for me? The argument here is that even when a colleague helps you with a difficult project out of the goodness of their heart, there is a payoff. Maybe it's building their own reputation. Maybe it's just avoiding guilt. Or maybe it's creating a future obligation that you are going to have to repay later. The takeaway? Once you truly understand self-interest, human behavior completely stops being confusing and becomes entirely predictable.
To anchor this, the source cites a classic quote from Niccolo Machiavelli himself: "Men never do good unless necessity drives them to it." It's a historical argument suggesting that people generally act morally only when it benefits them to do so, like when there's intense social pressure or looming legal consequences. When nobody is watching, the source claims, people just default to what serves their own self-interest. It's not a bug in human nature, it's a survival feature.
All right, moving on to Section 2, the illusion of fairness.
As we explore the systemic rules that govern our lives, we hit the third mental shift, and it is a blunt one. Fairness is a fairy tale. The naive view, the one we're basically taught from childhood, is that merit and hard work automatically guarantees success. You put your head down, you do the work, you get the promotion. But the dangerous mindset argues the system actually rewards leverage, timing, and strategy. Think about it. The people who just sit around waiting for their hard work to be magically recognized, they usually stay stuck. Meanwhile, others are out there playing the actual game of building relationships, getting visibility, and seizing leverage.
And this leads directly into the fourth shift. The naive view firmly believes that the rules apply equally across the board to everyone. The dangerous mindset, however, asserts that rules are essentially designed to constrain regular people. The source argues that powerful people bend, bypass, or just completely ignore the rules when it serves them, simply because they have the leverage and the resources to avoid the consequences. According to this framework, the rules don't exist to create equality, they exist to control the powerless. To really back up this rather cynical view, the source brings in another Machiavellian quote: "A wise prince cannot and should not keep his word when such observance may be turned against him." This highlights the historical precedent of the argument. The powerful break the rules the second those rules stop serving their interests. Following every single rule blindly, the source argues, doesn't actually make you virtuous, it just makes you controllable. You have to decide if you're going to handicap yourself by playing by rules that the people at the very top are completely ignoring.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, Trust and Vulnerability.
When we start assessing the people closest to us for the sake of self-preservation, we hit the fifth shift,
And wow, it's a heavy one to digest. Your enemies often pretend to be friends. After all, betrayal absolutely requires trust. The source warns that the people who will ultimately sabotage or compete with you are almost never your obvious enemies. Have you ever noticed that overly friendly colleague who is suddenly super eager to know all the intimate details of your struggles at work? The argument here is that proximity is danger. Deceivers get close to learn your secrets and figure out your weaknesses. Also, they can use them against you when the time is right.
Which brings us to the sixth shift, and this one directly attacks our modern cultural norms. Today, we're constantly told that vulnerability is a strength, that it builds deep connection, that it's brave. But the dangerous mindset offers a really harsh counter-narrative. Showing weakness simply paints a massive target on your back. The source claims that in a competitive, often predatory world, oversharing your insecurities doesn't build a bond, it literally just hands other people ammunition to use against you later.
The ultimate takeaway on vulnerability is summed up by perhaps Machiavelli's most famous quote of all time. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. The source uses this to encapsulate its stance that predators respect strength and they exploit openness. The core lesson it pushes here is to keep your struggles private, solve your problems quietly, and always project competence publicly, because ultimately, weakness invites disrespect and attack.
Finally, we reach Section 4, Playing the Game.
Once you actually see how the social board is set up, you face the ultimate choice in the seventh and final shift. You are in a game whether you choose to play or not. The source argues really strongly that refusing to be strategic, just keeping your head down, doing good honest work, and hoping for the best, that doesn't keep you out of the game. Actually, scratch that. It just makes you a piece on the board instead of a player. While you are trying to stay neutral, others are actively positioning themselves, building alliances, and frankly, passing you by.
The source shares this incredibly vivid metaphor to emphasize its final point. You must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. You have to be a fox to recognize the traps, meaning you need the awareness to see the manipulation and the underlying strategies happening all around you. But just seeing it isn't enough, right? You also need to be a lion to hold your ground and frighten off the wolves. It's about having both the sharp intelligence to see the reality of the game and the fierce strength to actually play it strategically yourself. In the modern workplace, this means seeing office politics for exactly what they are and having the firm boundaries to protect your own interests.
So let's quickly recap how this all ties together into a cohesive, if somewhat ruthless playbook. Watch behavior because words are cheap, recognize self-interest in everyone, understand that fairness is a lie, so build your leverage, accept that rules bend for the powerful, guard yourself against enemies disguised as friends, protect your weaknesses at all costs, and finally, play the game strategically. The source does warn that adopting this dangerously smart perspective might make you feel isolated at first, as you start seeing things others are totally blind to, but it argues it will ultimately leave you deeply empowered.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. Based on everything this source lays out, I want you to look at your own workplace and your own social circles. If this framework holds true, you have to ask yourself a hard question. Are you just a piece on the board waiting to be moved by someone else's strategy? Or are you a player? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this breakdown helps you decode and navigate the complex, often hidden dynamics of the world around you. Catch you next time.